I heard the senator is speaking later.
We need to leave, now.
The music was pounding through the speakers when Vivian Celeste Porter felt the first tug on her hair. She had been standing near the private lounge's bar, champagne flute trembling slightly in her hand, trying to blend into the dim lighting and pretend she belonged at this exclusive charity gala in downtown Atlanta. She was there as a favor to her colleague, filling in as a last-minute guest, and she had spent the entire evening feeling out of place among the city's elite donors and socialites. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what happened when she turned her head and saw him. Terrell Jacobson, her ex-boyfriend, the man she had fled from 8 months ago in the middle of the night with nothing but a duffel bag in her life. And he was walking straight toward her with that look in his eyes. And then the one she knew too well, the one that said she had made a mistake by thinking she could escape him. Before Vivian could move, before she could set down her glass or call for help or do anything at all, Terrell's hand was in her hair, fingers twisted into her carefully arranged braids, yanking her head back so violently that she gasped in pain. "You thought you could just disappear?" Terrell hissed, his face inches from hers, breath hot with alcohol and rage. "You thought I wouldn't find you?" The room seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The music became distant background noise. Vivian could feel dozens of eyes on her, but no one moved. No one intervened. These were wealthy, powerful people, but apparently, not one of them was willing to step between a man and the woman he was dragging backward by her hair through a crowded gala. Vivian tried to pull away, tried to grab his wrist, but Terrell was 6'3" and built like someone who had spent years in the gym specifically so he could overpower anyone who challenged him. She stumbled in her heels as he dragged her toward the exit, her scalp screaming in pain, tears already streaming down her face. Not from the physical hurt, but from the humiliation, the fear, the devastating realization that she was never going to be free of him. And then someone moved. A man who had been standing near the bar, watching the entire scene unfold with an expression of cold calculation, set down his whiskey glass very carefully and began walking toward them. He was shorter than Terrell, maybe 5'9", but there was something about the way he moved, the precision and confidence of each step, that made everyone in the room instinctively move out of his way. He was Asian, impeccably dressed in a midnight blue suit that probably cost more than Vivian's car, with dark hair swept back from a face that was beautiful in a severe, almost dangerous way. He stopped directly in front of Terrell, blocking the path to the door, and said in a voice that was quiet but carried absolute authority, "Let her go." Terrell looked at him with contempt. "Mind your business, man. This is between me and my girl." "I am not your girl," Vivian managed to choke out, her hand still trying to pry Terrell's fingers from her hair. The Asian man's expression did not change. "I am going to say this one more time. Let her go." Terrell laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Or what? You gonna do something about it?" The man reached up with one hand and very deliberately unbuttoned his suit jacket, the movement slow and controlled, almost theatrical. And that is when Vivian saw them. The tattoos. They started at his wrist and disappeared up his sleeve. Intricate designs in black and gray that she recognized even in her panicked state. She had seen enough crime documentaries, enough news reports to know what those particular patterns meant. This was not just any wealthy donor at a charity gala. This was someone connected, someone dangerous, someone you did not want to challenge. Now, before we go any further into what happened next, if you are already gripped by this story, if you can feel Vivian's terror and you need to know what this mysterious man did to save her, then stop right now and hit that subscribe button. Here is the truth most people do not want to hear. Over 75% of the people watching Philly Folktales videos right now have not subscribed to this channel. You watch, you feel every emotion, you get completely invested, and then you move on without joining our community. Do not be one of those people. Subscribe right now and become part of the Philly Folktales family. Smash that like button because it genuinely helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from: Atlanta, New York, Chicago, London, Amsterdam, I want to hear from every single one of you. Because what happened next in that gala, and what this man did for Vivian, changed her entire life in ways she could never have imagined. Terrell's grip on Vivian's hair loosened slightly as he processed what he was seeing. The tattoos, the calm, almost bored expression on the man's face as he unbuttoned his jacket. The way three other men, all Asian, all impeccably dressed, had materialized from different corners of the room and were now standing in a loose circle around them. You do not know who you are dealing with, Terrell said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I know exactly who I am dealing with, the man replied. A coward who puts his hands on women, someone beneath my notice. But because you have made a scene in a venue where I have business interests, and because you have caused distress to this woman, you have become my problem. So I will give you a choice. You can remove your hand from her hair right now, walk out of this building, and never come within 100 feet of her again. Or I can have my associates remove you, and I promise you, you will not enjoy the second option. You cannot threaten me, Terrell said, but his hand was no longer pulling Vivian's hair. It was just resting there now, holding on more from pride than actual control. The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I am not threatening you. I am explaining consequences. Now choose. For a moment, Vivian thought Terrell was going to do something stupid. She could feel the tension in his body, the anger coiled and ready to explode. But then one of the other men, the one standing directly behind Terrell, said something in what sounded like Korean, and whatever he said made Terrell's face go pale. Terrell released Vivian's hair so abruptly she stumbled forward. The man in the blue suit caught her elbow, steadying her with surprising gentleness, and moved her carefully behind him, placing himself between her and Terrell. Get out, the man said quietly. Terrell looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to reclaim some dignity from this humiliating retreat, but he was outnumbered and he knew it. He backed toward the door, pointing at Vivian one last time. This is not over. Yes, the man said, it is. If you contact her again, if you go near her place of employment, if you so much as drive past her building, you will answer to me. Do you understand? Terrell did not answer. He just turned and walked out, trying to maintain some semblance of pride, even though everyone in the room had just watched him back down from a man half a head shorter than him. The moment Terrell was gone, the tension in the room evaporated. Conversations resumed. The music seemed louder again. People turned back to their drinks and their networking as if nothing had happened, though Vivian noticed several women looking at her with sympathy and more than a few men looking at the Asian man with new respect or perhaps fear. Vivian stood there shaking, her hand pressed to her scalp where it still throbbed from Terrell's grip, trying to process what had just happened. The man who had saved her turned to face her, and up close she could see that he was probably in his early 40s, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. Are you hurt? He asked. And his voice was different now, softer, almost gentle. No. I mean, yes, but not badly. Thank you. Thank you so much. I do not know what would have happened if you had not. Vivian's voice broke and she realized she was crying again. But these were different tears now. Relief, gratitude, overwhelming emotions she could not quite name. Sit, the man said, guiding her to a nearby chair. One of his associates appeared with a glass of water, and the man handed it to Vivian, waiting patiently while she drank and tried to steady her breathing. My name is Jin Sung Park, he said when Vivian had composed herself slightly. Most people call me Jin. What is your name? Vivian Porter. It is nice to meet you, Vivian Porter, though I wish the circumstances were better. That man, is he your ex-husband? Ex-boyfriend, Vivian corrected, her voice still shaky. I left him 8 months ago. I thought I had been careful. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment, told my friends not to give him any information. I do not know how he found me. Jin's expression darkened. Men like that always find ways. They are obsessive, dangerous. You should not have to live in fear. I know, Vivian said, wiping her eyes. But what choice do I have? I filed a police report when I left him. I tried to get a restraining order, but he is good at staying just on the right side of legal. He never hit me where people could see the bruises, never made threats that I could prove. The police basically told me there was nothing they could do unless he actually hurt me badly enough to press charges. Jin was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow was not. May I ask why you stayed with him as long as you did? It was a fair question, one Vivian had asked herself 1,000 times. Because he was not always like that. When we first met, he was charming, attentive. He made me feel special. By the time I realized what he really was, I was already isolated from my friends and family. He had convinced me to quit my job, to depend on him financially, and he had convinced me that no one else would ever want me, that I was lucky he put up with me at all. Jin nodded slowly. Classic abuser tactics: isolate, control, destroy self-esteem. Make the victim believe they deserve the treatment they receive. He paused. But you got out. That takes courage most people do not have. I do not feel courageous, Vivian admitted. I feel terrified all the time. Even tonight, I almost did not come to this event because I was scared of being in public, being visible. And then he showed up anyway. How did you come to be here tonight? Jin asked. Vivian explained about her colleague, about filling in as a last-minute guest, about trying to rebuild her life and her career after leaving Terrell. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a nonprofit that provided services to domestic violence survivors, which she acknowledged was probably not coincidental given her own experiences. Jin listened without interrupting, and when Vivian finished, he said, "Han, I am going to give you my card. If that man bothers you again, if he shows up anywhere near you, I want you to call me immediately. Do you understand?" Vivian took the card he offered. It was heavy, expensive cardstock with minimal information. Just a name, Jin Sung Park, and a phone number. No company, no title, no indication of what exactly Jin did for a living, though Vivian had her suspicions. I cannot ask you to get involved in my problems, Vivian said. You have already done so much. You did not ask, I am offering. And I do not make offers I am not prepared to follow through on. Jin stood and buttoned his jacket again, the movement reversing the earlier threat display. You should go home. I will have one of my associates drive you. I do not think your ex will try anything tonight, but I would prefer you not take chances. I have my car here. Vivian started to protest, but Jin shook his head. We will have it delivered to your apartment tomorrow morning. Tonight you will let someone make sure you get home safely. Please, it would make me feel better. There was something about the way he said it, the genuine concern in his voice, that made Vivian agree. One of Jin's associates, a younger man who introduced himself simply as David, drove her home in a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Vivian made in 2 years. He walked her to her apartment door, waited while she unlocked it and checked inside, and then gave her a small nod before leaving. Vivian locked the door behind her, engaged the deadbolt and the chain, and then slid down to the floor and cried for 20 minutes straight. Not just from fear or relief, but from the overwhelming realization that she had spent 8 months believing she was completely alone in this fight, and tonight a complete stranger had stepped in and protected her in a way no one else ever had. She woke up the next morning to find her car parked in her designated spot, keys in an envelope slipped under her door, along with a note written in elegant handwriting. Your vehicle returned as promised. Rest today. Recover. You are stronger than you know. Choranation. Vivian held the note for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to understand why this man, this clearly dangerous and powerful man, had bothered to help her. She did not know anything about Korean organized crime beyond what she had seen in movies, but she knew enough to understand that Jin was not someone who did things without reason. For 3 weeks, Vivian heard nothing from Jin or from Terrell, and she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, the encounter at the gala had actually scared Terrell off for good. She went back to her routine, working at the nonprofit, attending her Thursday night support group for domestic violence survivors, seeing her therapist every other week. She was rebuilding her life piece by piece, and for the first time in months, she felt like she might actually succeed. Then on a Tuesday evening, as she was walking to her car after work, she saw Terrell's truck parked across the street from her office building. Vivian's heart stopped. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, keys clutched in her hand. I was trying to decide if she should run back into the building or try to get to her car before he saw her. But it was too late. Terrell had spotted her, and he was getting out of the truck, crossing the street toward her, with that familiar swagger that used to make her stomach clench with fear. "Vivian," he called out, his voice falsely cheerful. "We need to talk." "No," Vivian said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "We do not. Stay away from me." "Come on, baby, do not be like that. I just want to apologize for what happened at the gala. I had too much to drink, I was not thinking straight, but I miss you. I want us to work things out." This was new. In all the years Vivian had been with Terrell, he had never apologized for anything, never admitted fault, never showed vulnerability. It was a trap. It had to be. "Dear, I am not interested in working things out," Vivian said, backing toward the building entrance. "I want you to leave me alone. If you do not, I am calling the police." Terrell's expression shifted, the mask of contrition slipping to reveal the anger underneath. "You are going to call the police? You are going to embarrass me again, like you did at that party? You think your new boyfriend is going to save you every time? He is not my boyfriend. He is just someone who was decent enough to help when you were assaulting me in public." "Assaulting you?" Terrell laughed. "Is that what you are calling it now? I barely touched you. You always were dramatic." Vivian pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I am calling the police. Leave now or I am reporting you for harassment." For a moment, Terrell looked like he was going to call her bluff. Then his eyes shifted to something behind her, and his expression changed completely. Vivian turned and saw Jin's black Mercedes pull up to the curb, and Jin himself getting out, buttoning his jacket in that same deliberate way he had at the gala. "Mr. Jacobson," Jin said, his voice carrying easily across the sidewalk, "I believe I was very clear about the consequences of you coming near Ms. Porter again." Terrell's face flushed with anger. "This is a public street. I can be wherever I want." "Actually," Jin said, walking closer until he was standing beside Vivian, "you cannot. Ms. Porter's workplace has a no trespassing policy. This parking lot is private property. You are currently violating that policy, and if you do not leave immediately, then I will have you arrested." "You cannot have me arrested. You are not a cop." Jin smiled that cold smile again. "No, but I am very good friends with several people who are, and they would be very interested to hear about your pattern of harassment and stalking. In fact, I took the liberty of having a conversation with a detective in the domestic violence unit after our last encounter. She was quite interested in your history with Ms. Porter." Terrell's eyes narrowed. "You have been investigating me?" "Thoroughly. Would you like to know what I found? Multiple ex-girlfriends with similar stories. 2 previous restraining orders that you violated. A sealed juvenile record that is quite disturbing. You are a dangerous man, Mr. Jacobson. And dangerous men need to be watched very carefully." Vivian could see Terrell struggling with his rage, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight. "You do not know who you are messing with." "On the contrary," Jin said, "I know exactly who I am messing with. A small-time bully with a history of violence against women and delusions of importance. You, on the other hand, have no idea who you are messing with. And if you are smart, you will get in your truck and drive away before you find out." The 2 men stared at each other for a long moment. Then Terrell turned to Vivian. "This is not over." "Yes," Jin said quietly. "It is. If you contact Ms. Porter again, if you come near her or her workplace, if you so much as mention her name to anyone, I will make your life extremely uncomfortable. Do you understand?" Terrell did not answer. He just turned and walked back to his truck, got in, and drove away, tires squealing as he pulled out of the parking lot. Vivian realized she had been holding her breath and let it out in a long, shaky exhale. "How did you know I needed help?" Jin looked slightly embarrassed. "I have been having someone keep an eye on you, just to make sure you were safe. When they reported that Mr. Jacobson had shown up at your workplace, I came immediately." "You have been having me followed." Vivian did not know whether to be grateful or disturbed. Not followed, protected. There is a difference. I hope you do not mind. Vivian thought about it. A month ago, she would have been offended, would have felt like her privacy was being violated. But standing here, I'm still shaking from another encounter with Terrell. She just felt grateful. "No, I do not mind. Thank you. Again." Jin nodded. May I take you to dinner? I think we should talk. They went to a Korean restaurant in a strip mall near Buford Highway, the kind of place that looked unimpressive from the outside, but was clearly beloved by the people inside. Jin was greeted by name by the owner, an older Korean woman who fussed over him in rapid Korean before showing them to a private room in the back. Over bulgogi and banchan and soju that Vivian barely touched, Jin explained his situation in a way that was both candid and carefully edited. My family has business interests in Atlanta, he said. Import-export primarily, real estate, some investments. It is legitimate business mostly, though we have connections to less legitimate enterprises through family relationships in Korea. I do not participate in the criminal side of things myself, but I benefit from the protection and resources that come from those connections. So you are not actually in the Mafia, Vivian said. Jin smiled. The term Mafia is not quite accurate for Korean organized crime. We call it Kangpai. But to answer your question, no, I am not directly involved in criminal activities. However, I am connected to people who are, and those connections give me a certain amount of influence and reach. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what I am offering. I can protect you from your ex in ways the police cannot, but I also want you to understand the potential cost. Association with me, even peripherally, could complicate your life. People may ask questions, make assumptions. Vivian thought about this carefully. You are giving me a choice. I am. You can thank me for my help and we can part ways here, and I will still make sure Mr. Jacobson does not bother you again. Or you can accept my ongoing protection and assistance, with the understanding that it comes with complications. What do you want in return? Vivian asked, because in her experience, men like Jin did not offer help without expecting something. Jin set down his chopsticks and looked at her directly. I want nothing in return. No favors, no obligations, no expectations of any kind. I am offering this because I believe you deserve to feel safe and because I have the resources to make that happen. That is all. People do not just help strangers for nothing. Most people do not. But I am not most people, and you are not a stranger anymore. You are someone who needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. Is that not reason enough? Over the next 3 months, Jin became a fixture in Vivian's life in ways both obvious and subtle. He never imposed, never showed up uninvited, but he was always available when she needed him. When Terrell tried to contact her through a mutual acquaintance, Jin made a single phone call and it stopped. When Vivian's landlord tried to illegally raise her rent, Jin had a conversation with the building's owner, and suddenly Vivian had a new lease with better terms. He took her to dinner once a week, always to different restaurants, always interesting places she would never have found on her own. He introduced her to Korean culture, to the food and music and customs of his heritage. He was patient with her questions, generous with his time, and completely respectful of her boundaries. And slowly, carefully, Vivian began to heal in ways she had not even realized were possible. She started smiling again, started sleeping through the night without nightmares, started believing that maybe she could have a life that was not defined by fear and survival. She went back to school part-time to finish the degree she had abandoned when she got involved with Terrell. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones. She started painting again, something she had loved before Terrell convinced her it was a waste of time. Jin encouraged all of it, celebrating her victories and supporting her through setbacks without ever making it about himself. And somewhere in those months, Vivian realized she was falling for him, which terrified her because she had promised herself she would never give another man that kind of power over her life. One evening, 6 months after the gala, Vivian and Jin were having dinner at his favorite restaurant when Vivian finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been bothering her for weeks. Why me? She asked. Out of all the people you could help, all the causes you could support, why have you invested so much time and energy in me? Jin was quiet for a long time, considering his answer. Because when I saw what was happening to you at that gala, I saw my sister. She was in a relationship like yours once, with a man who hurt her and controlled her and made her believe she was worthless. She tried to leave him 3 times. Each time he found her and convinced her to come back. The 4th time she tried to leave, He killed her. Vivian felt the air leave her lungs. Jin, I am so sorry. It was a long time ago, 15 years. But I promised myself that if I ever had the opportunity to help someone in her situation, I would not hesitate. I would not look away. I would do whatever it took to make sure they survived when my sister did not. You have done so much more than just help me survive, Vivian said. You have given me my life back. Jin reached across the table and took her hand, the first time he had ever initiated physical contact beyond a polite handshake. You gave yourself your life back. You left him. You reported him. You rebuilt. I just made sure you had the space to do it safely. 8 months after the gala, Vivian received news that Terrell had been arrested, not for anything related to her, but for assaulting his new girlfriend in a hotel lobby. The woman had pressed charges, and between her testimony and the evidence Jin's investigator had quietly compiled from Terrell's previous victims, the prosecutor had a strong case. Vivian was asked to testify as a character witness, and she agreed, though the thought of seeing Terrell again, even in a courtroom, made her physically ill. Jin offered to come with her, and Vivian accepted gratefully. The day of the hearing, Vivian walked into the courthouse wearing a navy suit Jin had helped her pick out, her hair styled professionally, her head high. Jin walked beside her, a quiet, steady presence that made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. When it was Vivian's turn to testify, she told her story clearly and calmly. She described Terrell's pattern of abuse, the escalating violence, the control tactics, the fear that had dominated her life for 2 years. She described the night she finally left, and the 8 months of looking over her shoulder that followed. And she described the gala and what Terrell had done in front of a room full of witnesses. Terrell's attorney tried to discredit her, suggested she was exaggerating, that she had a vendetta against his client. But Vivian had documentation, hospital records from a broken wrist Terrell had caused, text messages where he threatened her, and most damning, the testimony of 3 other women who had survived relationships with Terrell and were finally brave enough to come forward. The judge sentenced Terrell to 3 years in prison for aggravated assault, plus additional time for violating previous restraining orders. It was not as much as Vivian had hoped for, but it was something. It was accountability. It was consequences. It was proof that sometimes, eventually, abusers face justice. Outside the courthouse, Jin put his arm around Vivian's shoulders and said, "Are you okay?" "I am more than okay," Vivian said, and realized it was true. "I am free." They celebrated that night, just the two of them, at a quiet restaurant overlooking the city. Jin ordered champagne and toasted to Vivian's courage, and Vivian toasted back to Jin's kindness and the unexpected ways life sometimes brought the right people together at exactly the right moment. I need to tell you something," Vivian said when they were halfway through dinner, "and I am not sure how you are going to react." Jin set down his glass, his expression serious. "Tell me. I have feelings for you, real feelings, and I know that is complicated because of how we met, and because I am probably still recovering from everything with Terrell, and because you have been so careful not to push anything beyond friendship. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest about it." Jin was quiet for a long moment, and Vivian's heart sank. She had miscalculated. She had mistaken his kindness for something more. She had. "I have feelings for you too," Jin said quietly. "I have had them for months. But I did not want to say anything because I was afraid you would feel pressured or obligated because of everything I had done to help you. I never wanted you to be with me out of gratitude or because you felt like you owed me something. Is that why you have been so distant, so careful? Yes, I wanted you to have time and space to heal without any pressure from me. I wanted you to choose me, if you chose me at all, from a place of genuine feeling, rather than feeling like you had to." Vivian reached across the table and took his hand. "I am choosing you, not because I owe you anything, but because you are kind and patient, and you make me feel safe and seen in ways I have never felt before. But I am also scared. I am scared of being hurt again. I am scared of giving someone power over my life again. Yeah, I am scared of all of it." "Then we go slowly," Jin said. "We build trust. We communicate. We make sure you always feel safe and in control of what happens between us. And if at any point you need to step back or slow down or stop entirely, we do that with no questions and no resentment. Does that sound acceptable? It sounded more than acceptable. It sounded like exactly what Vivian needed. They dated for a year before Jin proposed, and when he did, it was in the most Jin way possible. No grand gestures, no public displays, just the two of them in his apartment, cooking dinner together, when he turned to her and said, "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." Vivian said yes, and they were married 6 months later in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. Vivian's support group friends came, and so did several of the women who had testified against Terrell. Women Vivian had stayed in touch with and helped through their own healing journeys. Jin's family flew in from Korea, and while there was some initial tension about him marrying outside their culture, they quickly fell in love with Vivian's warmth and strength. The marriage was not perfect. Vivian still had moments of fear and anxiety, triggered by unexpected things that reminded her of Terrell. She still sometimes woke up from nightmares, panicked and disoriented. But Jin was patient. He learned her triggers and helped her work through them. He went to therapy with her when she asked. He celebrated her victories and held her through her setbacks. And Vivian learned to trust again, not blindly, not naively, but with open eyes and clear boundaries. She learned the difference between control and care, between possessiveness and protection. She learned that healthy love did not require her to make herself smaller or quieter or less than she was. 2 years after they married, Vivian and Jin started a foundation together, one that provided legal support and safe housing for domestic violence survivors. They used Jin's business connections and Vivian's nonprofit experience to create something that actually made a difference, that helped women escape dangerous situations and rebuild their lives the way Vivian had. One evening, while they were working on grant applications for the foundation, Jin looked up from his laptop and said, "Do you ever think about that night at the gala?" "Sometimes," Vivian admitted. "I think about how terrified I was, how helpless I felt, how certain I was that no one was going to help me. And now I think about how one moment, one person making the choice to intervene, changed the entire trajectory of my life. You saved me that night, Jin, not just from Terrell, but from the fear and isolation that had been consuming me. You gave me back my life." Jin shook his head. "I gave you space and support. You did the hard work of reclaiming your life yourself. Never forget that." 5 years after the gala, Vivian was speaking at a domestic violence awareness event when a young woman approached her during the reception. The woman was nervous, fidgeting with her hands, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said. "I heard you speak last year at a different event, and your story gave me the courage to leave my boyfriend. He was not as violent as yours was, but he was controlling, and he made me feel worthless. Hearing you talk about how you got out, how you rebuilt your life, it made me realize I could too." Vivian hugged the young woman tightly. "I am so proud of you. How are you doing now?" "Better. I am in therapy. I got my own apartment. I am going back to school. It is hard, but I am doing it." "That is all that matters. You are doing it. And if you ever need support or resources, please reach out to our foundation. We are here to help." After the woman left, Jin came up beside Vivian and put his arm around her waist. "You are changing lives." "We are changing lives," Vivian corrected. "For this foundation is as much yours as it is mine. The foundation maybe, but the impact, the hope you give people just by sharing your story, that is all you." That night, lying in bed with Jin beside her, Vivian thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the terrified woman being dragged across a gala by her abuser, to the confident, healed person she was now. From believing she would never escape Terrell, to building a life and a marriage and a purpose beyond anything she had imagined possible. She thought about Jin unbuttoning his jacket at that gala, a gesture that seemed small but carried so much weight, so much promise of protection and consequence. She thought about all the times since then that Jin had protected her, supported her, stood beside her while she found her own strength. And she thought about the foundation, about all the women they had helped and would continue to help, about the ripple effect of one person choosing to intervene, choosing to help, choosing to believe that one woman's safety and dignity mattered enough to risk getting involved. Jin had told her once that he intervened because of his sister, because he had promised himself he would never look away when someone needed help. But Vivian knew there was more to it than that. Jin had a fundamental belief in doing what was right, in using his privilege and power to protect people who could not protect themselves. And that belief had changed everything. Not just for Vivian, but for all the women who had found safety and support through their foundation. For all the people who heard Vivian speak and found courage to leave their own dangerous situations. For all the lives touched by the choice one man made to unbutton his jacket and stand between a woman and her abuser. 8 years after that night at the gala, Vivian was invited to speak at a conference on domestic violence intervention strategies. During her talk, she shared the story of meeting Jin, of how he had stepped in when no one else would, of how that single act had set in motion a chain of events that led to her healing and eventually to helping hundreds of other women. People always ask me, Vivian said from the podium, what they should do if they see someone being hurt, what they should do if they witness abuse, and my answer is always the same. Do something. Do not look away. Do not convince yourself it is none of your business or that someone else will handle it. Step in, speak up, offer help, because you have no idea how much that one moment of courage might change someone's life. In the audience, Jin sat beside their 6-year-old daughter, who had been learning about her mother's story in age-appropriate ways, and he smiled. Because this was the woman he had seen underneath the fear and trauma that night at the gala. This was the woman he knew she could become if given the chance and support and safety to heal. Vivian was not a victim anymore. She was not defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by what she had built in spite of it, by the lives she had changed, by the courage she displayed every day by continuing to share her story and help others find their own paths to freedom. And it had all started with one man making the choice to unbutton his jacket and step between a woman and her abuser. One moment that changed 2 lives and eventually hundreds more. That evening after the conference, Vivian and Jin walked through the city hand in hand, their daughter skipping ahead of them, and Vivian felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Are you okay? Jin asked, noticing her emotion. I am perfect, Vivian said. I was just thinking about how grateful I am. For you, for this life, for all of it. Jin stopped walking and turned to face her. I am the one who should be grateful. You took a chance on me when you had every reason not to trust anyone. You let me be part of your healing journey. You built this incredible life and you let me share it. That is a gift I will never take for granted. They stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, this couple who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful anyway. And Vivian thought about karma, about justice, about the unexpected ways the universe sometimes brings the right people together at exactly the right time. She had gone to that gala expecting nothing more than a boring evening of networking and small talk. She had left having met the man who would change her life, who would help her heal, who would become her partner in building something meaningful from the ashes of her trauma. And Terrell, the man who had tried so hard to destroy her, had inadvertently led her to the exact person who would help her become stronger than she had ever been. That was karma. That was poetic justice. That was the universe saying that sometimes when you survive the worst thing that ever happened to you, you get rewarded with the best thing you never knew you needed. Vivian and Jin walked home together through the Atlanta evening, their daughter between them, all 3 of them heading toward a future that was bright and safe and full of possibility. A future that existed because one night, one man had made the choice to step forward when everyone else stepped back. And in doing so, he had saved not just one woman's life, but had helped her build a legacy of helping others do the same. The gala had been 8 years ago. The terror and pain of that night had faded into memory, but the love and healing that had grown from it remained, stronger and more real than any trauma could ever be. And that, Vivian thought, was the real story worth telling. Not just the horror of abuse, but the hope of recovery. Not just the violence of that night, but the tenderness of the thousands of days that followed. Jin had unbuttoned his jacket and changed everything. And Vivian had taken that gift of protection and safety and used it to rebuild not just her own life, but to help rebuild dozens of others. That was the power of intervention. That was the power of refusing to look away. That was the power of one person deciding that another person's safety mattered more than their own comfort or convenience. And it all started with a simple gesture at a gala and a decision to step between a woman and her abuser, and the promise that she would never have to face him alone again.